Winter had settled over the small town in a manner that felt both familiar and suffocating. Snow clung stubbornly to the eaves of the house, its white layers dulling the sharp edges of reality outside. Inside, the air carried a quiet chill, the kind that sinks into your bones despite a working furnace. The house itself was large, stately in its architecture, but emotionally hollow. The kind of home where light filled the spaces without ever warming them, and echoes of absent voices seemed louder than any laughter. He watched his child from the doorway of the kitchen, noticing the subtle shifts that had begun weeks ago. The small movements, previously unremarkable, now felt deliberate. A toy left untouched in the corner for hours, a book closed mid-page, the slow hesitancy before a step into a room. These small things had begun to compose a quiet symphony of unease. The father leaned against the frame, arms crossed, eyes tracing the delicate motions of his child. Silence had replaced noise where once there was a constant stream of energy. There were no laughter-filled footsteps racing down the hall, no excited shouts over imagined adventures. Instead, there were pauses, glances cast toward the door, small, careful gestures that spoke volumes in the absence of words. The new partner moved through the house with a composure that was precise, almost mechanical. Tasks were completed efficiently, breakfast prepared, laundry folded, rooms tidied, but never with warmth. There was no warmth in her smile, no softness in her tone, no imperfection in her gestures. She existed in the home as a force of order, not affection. And yet, she was careful, meticulous. Nothing overt, nothing loud or uncontainable. The tension she brought was not screamed. It was felt, settling like frost on the edges of every room. One morning, the child approached the kitchen counter, hands clasped over a small, worn notebook. "I don't want her to touch it," the child said quietly, almost as if whispering to the walls rather than speaking to the father. The words were barely audible, yet they hung heavily in the room. Fear and uncertainty were embedded in their simplicity, a fragile truth barely acknowledged. The father considered this quietly. There was no rush, no drama, no urgent confrontation. He did not ask why, did not demand explanations. He had learned long ago that children reveal themselves in subtle patterns, in small truths, whispered between the spaces of silence. He decided, in that instant, to watch rather than act. Observation would be his tool, restraint his ally. There would be no impulsive confrontation, no rash decisions, only vigilance and patience. A plan began to form in his mind, simple in its construction. Protect the child, gather evidence through attention and care, and maintain a presence strong enough to intervene if necessary, yet invisible enough not to disturb the fragile equilibrium. It was a quiet strategy, rooted not in revenge, but in preservation. Outside, the wind rattled the bare branches against the frosted windows. Inside, the child placed the notebook back on the counter with care, glancing toward the step-figure, who was now humming softly as she moved between rooms. The father remained in the doorway, silent, watching, letting the world unfold around him. A house filled with subtle tension, small gestures, and silent observations. A place where unease was quiet, yet undeniable. The days unfolded slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the motion of shadows across a wall. The father kept his physical distance where he could, yet remained vigilant. His presence was quiet, unassuming, woven into the background of the child's life without interference. Breakfasts were eaten in near silence, the clink of cutlery marking the passage of time. The step-figure moved through the house with precision, checking boxes, crossing items off lists, leaving no space for warmth or connection. The father observed everything. He noted the child's small rituals, the careful stacking of pencils in a cup, the smoothing of hair before sitting at the breakfast table, the repeated lining up of books on a shelf until they sat perfectly aligned. These were survival behaviors, markers of control in a home that offered none. During the day, the child found solace in small, private routines. There were moments spent curled up with a book near the frosted window, watching the snowflakes descend like tiny, silent confessions. There were sketches drawn on scraps of paper, each line a quiet rebellion against the world's coldness. Each ritual was a thread connecting the child to a sense of self, a lifeline that the father recognized and respected. The stepfigure's neglect was subtle, revealed more in what she omitted than what she performed. Meals were prepared, yes, but served without attention to taste or preference. Questions were answered, but with clipped tones and averted eyes. Comfort was absent. Presence was mechanical. The father noticed the half-smiles that were never returned, the glances that were never held, the subtle ways in which the child's needs were overlooked. In these moments, he remembered his own child at a younger age, their laughter filling the same rooms, now silent. He remembered bedtime stories told with exaggerated voices, the warmth of small hands in his own. Those memories became his guide, his way of reaching across the gulf of neglect without intrusion. Trust was central. He trusted what he observed in the child, the small acts of resilience and quiet defiance. He trusted the patterns that emerged, recognizing danger not through confrontation, but through careful attention. And the child, in turn, survived quietly, trusting in the invisible presence of a father who would intervene if necessary, even if he never spoke the words aloud. Evenings were spent in near stillness. The child would often sit at the piano, pressing keys tentatively, coaxing fragments of music into the room. The father would sit at a distance, listening, letting the sound fill the house with echoes of something long absent. Each note was a thread, weaving them together silently, creating a bond formed through observation rather than conversation. In this way, life continued, a delicate balance of neglect, resilience, and quiet vigilance. The father's eyes were always on the child, tracing the subtle changes that might indicate fear, distress, or danger. And the child, in turn, began to learn the rhythms of survival, developing coping mechanisms that were small but significant. Through patience and restraint, a bond grew, an invisible connection forged in memory, in quiet observation, and in the unspoken understanding that home could be a sanctuary, even amidst neglect. The moment arrived without preamble. It was a single, contained incident, precise and chilling in its execution. A small object, a relic from a past life, a music box that had belonged to the deceased parent, was moved, handled roughly, its intricate mechanism disrupted. The child found it and froze, hands hovering over the damage. No one shouted. No one made threats. The step-figure stood calmly, her face serene, as if the destruction of something cherished was merely routine, insignificant. Her intent was clear in the stillness, the controlled gestures, the quiet absence of remorse. The child's reaction was immediate but contained. Grief and disbelief replaced fear or hysteria. Hands trembled, a soft intake of breath was the only sound. Eyes widened not in terror, but in sorrow, processing the violation of something sacred. The father intervened once, decisively, but without spectacle. He moved with calm efficiency, removing the child from the scene, securing the object, and confronting the step-figure through action rather than words. The moment passed without drama, yet the message was unambiguous. Safety was ensured. Boundaries were drawn. Evidence of intent was left in the ruined music box. in the step-figure's precise but cold actions. No speech was necessary. The truth revealed itself through presence, through the father's measured response, through the child's quiet acknowledgement of loss and relief. Afterward, the house seemed to breathe differently. The tension remained, but it was shifted now, directed by awareness rather than ignorance. The child's grief was present, but contained, a testament to resilience shaped by subtle observation and unspoken trust. The immediate aftermath focused on safety. Rooms were assessed, routines reestablished, and small victories in daily life celebrated. The father remained a quiet anchor, guiding the child through grief, without imposing judgment or rushing recovery. Healing was slow and imperfect. Therapy sessions introduced new tools for expression, for processing pain. Daily routines, meals, bedtime rituals, quiet activities became anchors for stability. Consistency was emphasized over excitement, presence over spectacle. Time passed almost imperceptibly. The child regained voice in small ways. A story read aloud, a song played on the piano, a question asked without hesitation. Each act, though minor, represented a reclaiming of agency and confidence. New warmth entered the home gradually, always with consent, always carefully. Shared breakfast with laughter, quiet conversations before bedtime, small handholds while walking in the winter snow. These moments built a foundation stronger than fear or neglect. By the end, the home was a sanctuary. The father watched as the child moved through space with assurance, the quiet unease of the past replaced by measured comfort. The house held not wealth or spectacle, but a carefully nurtured sense of safety and belonging. A soft reflection closed each day, the father's gaze lingering on the child's calm face, the child's eyes meeting his with trust. The narrative was complete, not in dramatic confrontation or vengeance, but in the slow, steady restoration of life and love.